Welcome back to Open Line. Again, the phone lines are open. The number to call is 615-737-7587. Tonight, we're talking all things politics. I'm joined by Dr. John Val from MTSU, who's a political science professor over at MTSU. And, earlier in the hour, we were talking about Mar-a-Lago and the FBI search over at former President Donald Trump's home in Florida. And now we're kind of switching gears into the January 6th committee, because we were just talking about that at the tail end there. But the question that I wanted to ask was how you think this FBI search will impact President Trump's, I guess, aspirations for running for re-election.
Of course, much will depend on not only what they find, but how soon they find it. There's a legal doctrine. It's not actually in the Constitution. It's more a Department of Justice policy that you cannot indict a sitting president. I think you could indict a person running for president, but there'd always be the danger that it would be interpreted as trying to tip the scales, one way to the other. Remember, a lot of the controversy involving Comey and Hillary Clinton had to do with, probably inadvertently, but, did he end up influencing the election in a way that probably he should not have? So, one incentive for the president might be, or for former president, if Trump were to declare his candidacy, he might be a little harder to touch legally. On the other hand, if the charges really seem serious, I think there'd be a lot of Republicans and Americans in general who might say, it's dicey. Trump's personality is dicey enough without adding the possibility that, that he could be under sort of a legal shade during his whole term.
Well, we got our first call, actually, and this is Sandra on line 1. Sandra, can you hear us?
Hi. What I don't understand is why, when they went to his home to get, to find out what he had, why didn't they check his hotel?
That's a great
and
question.
Also, if we'd have done, if a normal citizen done what he done on January the 6th, they'd have put us in jail and thrown the key away.
No,
so I don't know why they ain't got him in jail yet.
Okay. Dr. Val?
I think the reason they raided Mar-a-Lago is that they, the specific the primary purpose of this raid was to get documents. And they had pretty good evidence that they had been moved to that location. Now, the second question, it's a really valid question. I'm among those, and I'm going to age myself here, but I don't question his motives, but I'm still not sure that Jerry Ford did right when he pardoned Richard Nixon. Because it did make it look as though, even though everybody pretty much knew he was guilty, that he was above the law because he was president. And if there's any legal principle that's important in America, it's that no man or woman, but, particularly no potentate, no president, no monarch is above the law. But, that being said, the other principle is everybody's entitled to due process. Trump is entitled to the same presumption of innocence as I would want if somebody had executed the search on my own house. So it's complicated, but I think Sandra's gotten to the root of a lot of it.
Absolutely. Sandra, thank you so much for calling. Of course, when we're talking about the January 6th committee, and, I think this is a perfect segue into that because, I think a lot of people watched the drama unfold over the past several weeks of when everything was being discussed, people, coming forward to testify in front of this committee. And a lot of folks were wondering what's next, kind of holding their breaths thinking, okay, well, what's next? Where do we go from here? And then you have this FBI raid that happens in Mar-a-Lago. And it seems to just kind of pile on one thing after another. But still, the question remains, what's next? Are there charges? Will the president face any type of indictment? And so, where do we stand right now from your understanding of the January 6th committee and where they plan to move forward?
Well, I mean, they are definitely planning to have more hearings. You know, some of us thought that it was going to be over a couple of weeks ago, but they've definitely indicated, you know, that they'll continue. Of course, the person who's been, she's not the chair, but the person who has been pretty much leading it has been Liz Cheney. She was not reelected. She sees the main issue, and I mean, it's interesting. You could say the main issue involved in January 6th is lawlessness and encouraging of lawlessness. But I think she seems to sees the major issue as that of election denial. You know, if in a democratic Republican society where, you know, what separates us from other governments is that we elect our representatives, if we're not willing to abide by the actual results of those elections, our democracy, our republic is in jeopardy. And, you know, it is interesting that particularly among Republicans, election deniers, a number of prominent ones, including the opposition to Liz Cheney, have been elected. Now, that being said, in part, the Democrats are responsible for this because in what I consider to be very irresponsible actions, they have in many cases supported the election deniers, sent money their way in hopes that they will be able to beat them more easily in the general election. And I just don't believe in playing with fire like that. If election denial is serious, as I believe it is, I don't believe any money should be spent on any of that. But, you know, politics are what they are, and I guess, you know, if they see an advantage, any party's going to try to take it.
Yeah. Well, and I heard Cheney give her concession speech yesterday, I believe it was, and she made 2 points that really caught my attention. One, to say, you know, I lost because the voters chose someone else. It wasn't a matter of, you know, me trying to, I guess, contend or, you know, contest the results. It wasn't a matter of her trying to say that, you know, let's double check these results now because, you know, things could be swayed one way or another, and, you know, let's make sure that we get this right. She said, I know I lost, and even though I lost, I'm willing to stand and you know, take the fight to or with the January 6th committee to anyone who, you know, committed those acts at the Capitol. And that, of course, includes former President Donald Trump. And so you have, you know, Ms. Cheney saying all these things, knowing that at some point she's going to be out of office. I guess for some folks that might think, okay, well, what does that mean for moving forward with this committee if she's going to be out at some point? I believe it would be January, would it not?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And so that's still a few months from now.
In my judgment, you know, she is playing the role of a statesman, and she's doing it very consciously. She may have aspirations of her own. It sounds as though I don't think she believes that she would become president as a Republican because too much of the party right now seems to be beholden to Trump. But it sounds like she might be willing to be the spoiler. You know, if it takes 2 Republicans in there against 1 Democrat, and that's the only way you can defeat him, it sounds like she's willing to offer herself up. You know, it's interesting because she's only been in Congress 3 terms, and, you know, it's the House. So she's only been there 6 years. But of course, she comes in because of her father and to some extent her mother. She comes in with tremendous name recognition. And frankly, I think she's one of the better speakers that I have heard in, you know, among modern politicians. She seems to have a fire in her belly that, you know, tries to speak truth to power as she understands it. So I wouldn't, you know, she may not be in Congress, but I think she will remain part of the debate. Now, what becomes interesting is, of course, she's one of only 2 committee members, the January 6th committee, who are Republicans. And Adam Kinzinger, who's the other, it chose not to run for re-election, pretty much seeing the writing on the wall. And I do think there has been a real advantage in having a committee that has a bipartisan composition to it. And I don't know what other Republicans could be put in there. You know, one of the fascinating things about the January 6th committee is if you didn't know anything else about it other than the party identification of the people who testified, you would think that it is a pro-Republican committee, because almost everybody that's been called there has been an aide or somebody who worked directly for Trump. So,
Yeah.
you know, that I don't know what will happen to that dimension. Of course, it'll partly depend. You know, I think the projection is that the Democrats will probably recapture the House. And if they do, they could maybe even shut the committee down or certainly change its composition.
Well, we'll be right back. We're going to send it to a commercial break. Of course, you can always call in. The number is right there on the screen, 615-737-7587. We'll see you soon.